This episode is brought to you by Bleacher Report. How do you follow sports? From college football to the NBA, Bleacher Report brings you the latest news, live scores, and epic highlights from your favorite leagues, teams, and athletes, all in one app. Dive into exclusive shows hosted by your favorite athletes and original Bleacher Report series with breaking news, rumors, and predictions all season long. Download Bleacher Report to personalize your coverage.
This Steve Jones Show podcast is now loading. The Steve Jones Show podcast is presented by Sunbury Motor Company, Purdy Insurance, Brewers Outlet, and NIL Game Changers. Bringing you an in-depth look at Penn State sports and more. This is the Steve Jones Show on News Radio 1070 WKOK. The Steve Jones Show is presented by Sunbury Motor Company, Purdy Insurance, and Brewers Outlet. Now from the Sunbury Motor Studio, here's Steve Jones.
This half hour brought to you by Purdy Insurance, Market Street in Sunbury. Go to purdyinsurance.com. Auto, home, life, business, boat, motorcycle, RV. We have a multitude of insurance needs. We do. Indeed, we do. And because of that, you need somebody to really keep it organized, make sure you're fully insured, and also make sure they do everything they can to save you money. That's big. We work with the suit. He's cheap, and he's all about saving money. Usually it's not ours. All right. Purdy Insurance, Market Street in Sunbury. Go to purdyinsurance.com. We bring in the outstanding, the fabulous Neal Coolong. Sir, welcome.
As always, it's my great pleasure to be here. I hope you guys are doing well.
Happy holidays, by the way, to you and your great family.
You as well. I'm glad we could get one in to commemorate the season here.
Absolutely. And it's we knew that the Steelers, when they hit the stretch run, they would be a few more football version of minefields for them to navigate. And the possibility was there that it may be difficult to do. A, are we seeing evidence of that? And B, why?
I think you have a team that, I don't want to say overachieved. I mean, you play your schedule, but let's be real. At the very least, in the game itself, within the fourth quarter, they won a couple that were pretty on the fence. They didn't necessarily have, a 60-plus percent chance of winning. That Washington game, that looked like it was dead. The first Ravens game, the one they won, didn't look like they had a chance at that. They built up the equity that I figured that they were going to spend. I mean, I thought at the beginning of the year, I didn't think Philadelphia would be as good a team as they are. But then we saw them lose this week as well. So who knows week to week. Baltimore followed by Kansas City on a short week. Baltimore on the road, then Kansas City at home. I don't think it gets worse than that. I don't know if anybody had a worse two-game stretch in the NFL. Yeah. And the Steelers really don't win short-week games anymore. They haven't in a while. I wouldn't feel all that optimistic about this one. If you look at it at a 10,000-foot level, for them to have what seems to be the yearly tradition of a Mike Tomlin December three-game losing streak, this one was probably the most likely for it to have happened. Which is funny to me because last year when they had it, it was against three teams they should have beat. Should have been a three-game winning streak. That's so right. Maybe they're paying the price and kind of, regressing to the mean here. But I think, when I look at it, 10-6 going into the final game of the season against Cincinnati isn't a bad spot for them to be. Also, I think it's instructive to point out that next man up, whatever cliche you want to use, when George Pickens is not on the field, they don't have anybody to replace George Pickens. It's not a schematic thing, which is really what next man up means. Right. You need to be ready to handle the assignment that you're given. there isn't anybody on their roster that's going to do what George Pickens can do. I don't know if you watched it at all, but T.J. Watt was not even close to 100%, not even close to 80% in that game. Very little impact against Baltimore. Deshaun Elliott out of nowhere is a Pro Bowl level safety. If you want to get on the Steelers for not having a Pro Bowl backup safety, then okay, but they don't have that, and their run defense is suffering tremendously with the losses that they have up front. And offensively, we've known how thin their receiving core was. Even when it's at 100%, it's one of the worst total units in the league. So it's important to look at it in the proper context. But at the end of the day, should we be evaluating this as a Super Bowl team? I don't think I ever really did. So to be honest, this isn't surprising. And I've all but already given them a loss against Kansas City. I don't think anybody would expect them to win that game. You put all those things together, they earned a playoff spot. They didn't back into it. It didn't come down to tiebreakers in the last weekend of the season. At the same time, though, they are beaten up pretty badly, and they need to get guys healthy if they're going to make anything of a competitive stand in the playoffs, which really would be a major takeaway going into this offseason, which is not what we've seen over the last couple of years. I think they have a shot at it this year. At full strength, they can beat Baltimore in Baltimore. I think they can compete against the top teams. But, yeah, I mean, with this current run, I think they lost the division. That doesn't out surprise me, and I don't think that it ruins the season either.
Well, see, that's what I understand always saying next man up. I understand that because somebody has to play, and you don't want, in other words, you're trying to portray the confidence in whomever's going to play. So that part I understand. But there's a reason the other guy's starting. There is a reason why the other guy plays a ton of plays. Because they're better than the guy that's replacing him. It's simple as that. I mean, it's not that difficult to figure out.
Yeah, in this particular case, too, the gap between the starter and the backup is pretty significant. I mean, it's not close. And on top of that, if you want to illustrate it even more, I mean, you can't take T.J. Watt off the field, even when he's at probably 60%. But that means you've got a guy that's barely over half of what he normally is. And we're talking about a guy who's expected to put up Hall of Fame stats in every game. Watt wasn't a factor in that game at all. I think he had one pressure that I saw. Lamar Jackson was unchecked and unchallenged within the pocket. That was just passing. I don't think he had a great passing game. Running the ball, Derrick Henry probably had the easiest, 160 yards, whatever it was, that he's had in his career. They really didn't get after him up front. They lost the line of scrimmage pretty badly, and the Ravens are not known as a dominant offensive line individually. They played very well as a scheme. They knew how to attack Pittsburgh where they were weakest, which was in multiple spots. Their linebackers proved to really not be all that effective without the help and the cover up front. And it reminded me a lot of 3-4 seasons ago, I think it was, 2021 it might have been, where they gave up like 180 yards in 3 straight games on the ground, something like that, when they had injuries. That was back when they had something called Daniel Archibong starting for them because of injuries. That depth on the defensive line, the value of that later in a year is significant, and the Steelers lost a little bit of it. They've got to figure out a way to get it back. Larry Ogunjobi has missed some time. Watt is not 100% healthy, like I said. They have to find ways to patch that kind of thing up if they want to have a real chance at making a run late into January. Obviously, it's not. They don't have the time to do that now, provided they can't get some guys healthy and get them back on the field and playing. I think they can come back to a pretty good level, but long term, they're going to have to find some realistic depth, which I think they've been building because it's a lot better off than it was the last couple of years. But it's not quite there yet, and I think we saw that on the field on Saturday.
Look, I know it was the Chicago Bears, but you talk about depth. I mean, Detroit's depth on defense has been tested beyond words. They figured out a way to win that game, and I know it's the Bears. I understand that. And I have a good friend, by the way, who's a big Bears fan, but probably gets it more than anybody else. But they've got a 2-game advantage now in Philadelphia because they have the tiebreaker. Because they won, Philadelphia lost. I mean, in some ways, I think what Detroit's doing here down the stretch is really kind of amazing and tells you a lot about them, doesn't it?
You know what it reminds me of is the Green Bay Packers in 2010, their Super Bowl run.
Yeah.
They had similar challenges. It wasn't as bad. I don't know how many teams have put 22 guys on injured reserve and won a top seed heading into the playoffs, which is what Detroit's kind of on pace to do right now. The Packers lost 5 or 6 defensive starters, I think, at various points throughout the year. Going into the final stretch of the season, they had to basically overhaul their entire defense. And if you recall, that was the year they were transitioning out of a 4-3 under Dom Capers into a 3-4 defense. The genius behind what they did was really to use their schematic, their personnel weakness as a schematic strength. Because on one hand, you don't play the game in a vacuum. It's not always about. I mean, the individuals competing really have a one-on-one matchup against somebody. That's just football. But from a schematic standpoint, it's using different guys in different ways. And the Packers were forced to face that problem. They had to solve that problem. And the solution of it is something that other teams haven't seen them do. So in that, you have a tactical advantage over your opponent. And I think that's a lot of what Detroit is able to do right now. When you have, the talent of a coaching staff, it largely comes down to how well the players play, right? And that is you putting them in position to be successful. They're not always successful with that. It's not always because the coach screwed up. Some guys, guys just lose sometimes. But what Detroit has, I think, is that chemistry where guys have a certain level of versatility, and they're willing to buy into what the coaches are telling them to do. And for me, one, this is a big part of why I think Aaron Glenn's going to be a head coach in the NFL sooner rather than later. Yeah. But two, it shows the remarkable character of the team, and that's not something, in my opinion, that you attribute to any one person. That's a lot of people, and that's a lot of people probably giving the same credit to one another, and that's what makes Detroit so difficult to beat. That they're a team. Look, plain and simple, Dan Campbell screwed up pretty bad against Buffalo. That's a bad mistake. We've seen Dan Campbell make really bad mistakes in games.
Yes. Yes.
They don't complain. They don't, kind of cry. I would, not to rub salt in the wound of your friend, but I think that's what you see a lot of the Chicago Bears doing. Blame the coach as much as you want. You have a quarterback on that team that does whatever he wants to do, and it's creating problems. And it seems like there's animosity between the players and the coaching staff. They're not buying into what they're being told to do. But they face a challenge and they back away. Detroit is just mowing through it like it's nothing, like it's all a part of the plan. Yeah. That's a remarkable team. That's a really difficult team to beat. The Packers ended up winning the Super Bowl. I think they were a 6th seed. They beat Pittsburgh, and the Packers were favored in that game.
Yep.
That's how well they were playing. And defensively, what you really saw from them is they took the ball away. Detroit has had some rough defensive games for sure, but they find a way to get the job done, drive to drive. Whatever it is that needs to happen, they tend to make it happen, and that's why you got to look at them as a favorite in a stacked NFC. That's a really difficult conference. Whoever wins that is going to go through a lot just to get to the Super Bowl, let alone taking on whoever's coming from the AFC.
So with that, I will follow up because I'm going to go to your hometown team, a team that could be a wild card team with 13 wins, the Minnesota Vikings. What makes the Vikings a winning team this year, despite the fact that they had some offseason changes?
A couple things that I really enjoy about the Vikings. First off, Kevin O'Connell, I think, is the most underrated coach in the NFL, and I said that this offseason.
Yep.
People don't understand what he did with Kirk Cousins and where Kirk Cousins was prior to his injury last year. He was legitimately playing at an MVP level. And to have Sam Darnold, king journeyman, king bust draft pick, come in and play at that same level. In other words, They didn't lose anything. It's just, KOC had that unit at a borderline playoff level last season, and they had plumbers and firemen playing quarterback for them. If you look and see the level of talent, Sean Mannion, the one guy, I don't remember his name, the kid from BYU, I think he was undrafted. They gave him a half to read. They gave him a half to play, and he was that bad. Yeah. Without Cousins, they fought to 8-9 wins, I think it was, something like that. A very competitive unit. They went out, and they don't really have any draft assets to utilize this coming year. They put everything into free agency because they had to get up to get a quarterback. They got a highly rated quarterback, but had to get that first year with a veteran out of the way first. And where they're playing, they're in a rebuilding year. Kevin O'Connell, my opinion, is coach of the year. I don't think he'll win that, but right. For whatever it's worth, I think it's fair to say he's clearly one of the best coaches in the game. On top of that, the way that he proves it, watch the first quarter of every Vikings game. You'll see a team that basically dominates its opponent on both sides of the ball. I don't think there is a team that comes out better prepared for their opponent than the Vikings each week. Now, if you really get into it, you talk to the top minds as far as the NFL game goes, the first quarter is largely scripted.
Right.
They kind of know what's coming, and it's us versus you. These are the things that we're going to do. We're going to base the rest of what we're going to do for the rest of the game on what happens within this first quarter. And teams have a very difficult time stopping the Vikings on their first drive, game in and game out. Defensively, they often get takeaways. They often get sacks. They jump out to a 7-0, 10-0, 10-3 lead often within the first quarter. They did it against the Lions in the game that they lost, which is another side here. Keep in mind, the Vikings 13 wins, and the Packers are 12. Right. I'm willing to bet one of the three NFC North teams is going to the Super Bowl. It's going to be one of them, just being one of the best divisions we've seen in recent memory. The Vikings, I think, are every bit as good as the Lions. They don't have kind of that feel-good story. They're not maybe as entertaining to watch as the prolific Lions offense is, but the Vikings are so good all around. You completely forget the fact that this team really kind of needed this year to turn around to get past Cousins' cap number, which, by the way, people that suggested Kirk Cousins should stay in Minnesota at $40 million a year. That worked out well. They're supposed to be, for next year and beyond, that was their team. They weren't going to play McCarthy. This was the year that they were going to build, put a realistic quarterback option out there. And I don't know what to tell you. If you don't think that Sam Darnold is not a top 5 MVP candidate, you're crazy. Darnold has played that well throughout the year. It all comes down to what the Vikings have done internally. They've rebuilt a pretty broken ship for a while there, and their best years are still ahead of them. They get cap space next year. They don't have any draft picks. After that, they have cap space and draft picks. Imagine what they're going to be. If McCarthy is anywhere near where Darnold is, which may or may not happen, we don't know. Right. You're looking at a team that's going to compete at a very high level over the next 3 years, and it's completely realistic to say the Vikings could be in the Super Bowl this year. The Vikings-Bills Super Bowl. That's what everybody wants, except me. I've got business interests with the Bills. I've got personal interests with the Vikings. It'd be a rough game for me personally, but it would be fun to see one of those two teams win.
No, again, the talent, Addison, Jefferson, Hawkinson, that they have. It's almost like a lot of people don't seem to know about the Vikings because they're not the Packers are darlings because they're from Green Bay. Detroit, great story because of last year. It seems like the Vikings are that team in the NFC that's flying under the radar, and there isn't a single team out there who wants to play them.
I agree completely, and throw in Philadelphia to that as well. It's like the Vikings are the team. Keep in mind, you watched it was just a brilliant football game. The Lions and Vikings, the first time they played in Minneapolis, that was a great game. Very well played on both sides. The Lions won on a last-second field goal, 27-24, I think it was, which I think is a pretty balanced final score between two really good teams. That's probably about what you would expect. There's no reason to think Minnesota can't beat Detroit. They've beaten Green Bay. They can beat Philadelphia, but you're exactly right. The other three teams are the ones that get far more of the national attention. Everything you hear about Minnesota is, oh, my God, Sam Darnold is doing this. Look at the defensive side of the ball. Look at what they're getting from players that you've never heard of before. Andrew Van Ginkel, you didn't know who he was.
Nope.
Blake Cashman, you kind of maybe knew who he was. You mentioned Hawkinson. You got to see Hawkinson play in college. I'm not sure I've ever enjoyed watching a college player more than I did watching Hawkinson play. It's just a phenomenal three-down tight end. They get so much out of every guy that they have. They've lost to Neil Hunter and signed Grenard for less than what Hunter got. The front office has made excellent moves there, and these are moves that you didn't necessarily think would pay off as much as it has in year one. But at the end of the day, they are behind Detroit on a last-second field goal from against a Lions team that was in the NFC Championship game last year and frankly should have won that game. They learned a lot from that. They've been a great team over the last 2 years. The Vikings are the upstart, and they're right there with them. So I'm excited. I think the NFC is going to really be where the action is this year. I think they're probably, whoever it is that's coming out, I think they're the ones that are going to win the Super Bowl. Whoever gets to the Super Bowl from the NFC will have beaten two excellent teams, at least, in my opinion, in the divisional and the conference championship games. I think that can be Minnesota. It's certainly possible. They're right up there.
Well, I'll tell you, we always thrill holiday blessings on this show. For more than a decade, you've been one of them. Thank you so much, sir.
Absolutely. The pleasure is all mine. Happy holidays, guys. Hope you enjoy it.
Neal Coolong. And half hour brought to you by Purdy Insurance on News Radio 1070 WKOK.
Party time, game time, or just fun time. Doesn't matter what time it is because it's Brewers Outlet time. The beverage supermarket has the area's largest beer selection. Imports, microbrews, ciders, and domestics. Pick from over 100 ice-cold 12-packs and dozens of 24-ounce singles. Soda, snacks, hot sauces, fresh roasted peanuts. Make it one-stop party shopping, and don't forget the pickle bar. So whatever you're celebrating or just doing it up, Brewers Outlet, Reagan Street, Sunbury wants to see you. And thank you for your years of patronage.
The holidays are a time of year to celebrate and reflect. Reflect on the past year, a year filled with challenges and uncertainty. Uncertainty that bred resilience and hope. Hope for healing, change, new beginnings, and unity. United as one people, one community, by one mission, to safeguard and protect what matters most. From all of us at Purdy Insurance, we wish you health, happiness, and joy this holiday season and success in the new year.